Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and in this video I'm going to hope to convey and show you all everything I know about loading up PlayStation 2 games on a PS2 with Open PlayStation 2 Loader, otherwise known as OPL. I had gotten around to doing this recently, and unfortunately it's not as drag and drop as I would like it to be, and I did run into some gotchas, so I'm going to be picking a few odd and problematic games as well too, to hopefully address everyone's concerns over some questions you might have if you're running into some games. So hopefully this video by the end should answer some questions and help you out of some situations you might run into. Now first of all, if you're planning to follow along with this, you will need your console, your PS2 system, with Open PS2 Loader. Now this can be a system with FreeHDBoot, FreeMCBoot, the Fortuna exploit, or if you want to load Open PlayStation 2 Loader from a USB drive, if you have that capability on a mod chip, that is totally up to you. It doesn't matter how you do this as long as you're able to open up OPL. If you have followed along with my PS2 Softmod video, you should have it available. And I would also recommend before watching this to check out my OPL update guide so you can get onto a newer version of OPL. But we have everything we need set up on here. Next up, there's also going to be a bit of a disclaimer I want to give as well too. I've gotten this video requested a lot. Many people have wanted to load games off of a USB drive using their PS2. Unfortunately, I am going to tell you all this is the worst way, in my opinion, to load up games on a PS2. It is convenient, you don't need to mess with discs, but because the USB slot on the PS2 is going to be the slowest method of reading a game, you will run into longer loading times, you are going to have FMV skipping, and you might run into some other issues here and there. In my opinion, the best methods of loading up PS2 games are going to be off of a disc, or off of your network store, or off of an internal hard drive if you have a Phat PS2. However, if you don't have anything else available, or let's say you're in a situation where you might have a PS2 Slim with a dead laser, just some hypothetical like that, playing through USB is certainly better than nothing. I just want to convey to you all that this is going to be the worst way of playing your games in terms of performance. Now that we have that all out of the way, let's go ahead and move over to our PC. Because we're going to need a few things. We're going to of course need our USB drive, we need to download a few items and applications, and we're going to need to grab our games that we want to play. So over at the PC, there's going to be several different links I'll have down below in the description for different downloads. The first of which is going to be the excellent OPL Manager. Just download the latest version of OPL Manager and save it somewhere you can easily find it. If you're going to be backing up your own disk-based games, and I'll be showing you that, on Windows I do recommend using ImgBurn. So you can just click download now and install that exe on your system. For games over 4 GB in size, which a good amount of the good games you'll probably want to play on PS2 are, you're going to need USBUtil or another similar application, but the one I'm going to be using is USBUtil. So for this, you can just go to the link and download the latest version available. I'm going to be downloading the latest beta version and the English translation of it. Now let's go ahead and take care of the USB drive. For this, we are going to need to format it. So we need to make sure it is FAT32. You can right click, go to properties, and as you can see, my file system is FAT32. In case it is not for you, you will need to back up any data you care about which is on this USB drive and then format it, which will wipe it. So for this, right click, go to format, and select your file system. It needs to be FAT32. Technically FAT or FAT16 will work, but I'm just going to recommend FAT32 straight away for this. You can click on start, OK, and it is formatted as easy as that. Now I want to use my larger USB drive for the rest of this tutorial, and what if you right click it, you go to format, and FAT32 is not available? Well, you cannot use either of these. You can't use NTFS, you cannot use exFAT. So we will need to use FAT32 for this. There is a piece of software I like to use. There's several different methods of doing this, but I like using this software on Windows because it's easy enough. This is called FAT32 format or GUI format. Just go to this link down below in the description, click on this photo here, and it will download an exe wherever you save it. Once you have your exe, you will need to close out of whichever formatter you have and close out of any windows like this, any File Explorer windows that you have. Make sure they are completely closed, but make sure you take note of which USB drive you're going to format. Mine is I. So I'm going to exit out of this, right click, run as administrator, say yes. Now you need to make sure you have found your USB drive. So mine is I, and that is my 128 gigabyte USB drive. I'm going to just remove this as well too, or I'll rename it to PS2 just so I know what to look for. It doesn't matter what the volume label is, I'm just doing that for the sake of clarity. A quick format is okay, start, okay, and it should now be formatted. So if we right click and go to the properties of this USB drive, it's now FAT32, when previously we couldn't format it to FAT32. So awesome, we have our USB drive set up. Now there's going to be two folders we need to make in here. Once you enter your USB drive, right click, go to new folder, and create a new one called CD, all uppercase, one word. That's going to be for your CD-based PlayStation 2 games. Now right click, go to new, create another folder, call this DVD. Again, self-explanatory, all uppercase, one word. That's going to be for our DVD-based PS2 games, which most of your PS2 games are going to be DVD. So now we need to start adding our games, don't we? Well, I do have a couple games here already that I have previously ripped over, but there's going to be a couple more that I'm going to be doing for the sake of this tutorial. So for this, you can go ahead and fire up ImgBurn. When you go into ImgBurn, go ahead, make sure you have your disk in your DVD drive. Now go to create image file from disk, and the first game that I'm going to be ripping is going to be a DVD. So as you can see right here, it says DVD-ROM. And I'm just going to read this at max speed, but you want to click on this button and decide where you want to save it and what you want to call it. I'm going to save it in here with the rest of my games and call it Mark of Cree, because that's the game I'm ripping. And now click on this button and let it rip your game over. This should just take a few minutes. Now mine is just finished ripping over, and I didn't explicitly cover this here, but when you click on this, it should just default to ISO, and that is exactly what you want for a DVD-based game. So that is all fine. We have our .iso file. So now that we have our DVD-based game covered, let's also rip over a CD-based game. Now for ripping a CD-based game using this method, this is going to be a little bit different because this cannot be any other format aside from ISO. It must be a .iso file, which is a little bit odd when you typically rip CD-based games. They're typically going to be in BenQ or IMG format. So for this, you can just do the same thing here. Once you pop in your disk, which mine is Silent Scope, and it says here CD-ROM, max speed is fine, click on this button, navigate over to where you want to save it and where you want to name it here. I'll call mine Silent Scope so I know what it's called. And when you do save as type, you want to save it as a ISO file. Not a bin file, not an image file. You want to use ISO for this specific rip. So now that you have that selected, press save, and then click on this button here, and this should take even less time to rip over. Now it will also give you this heads up here if you're using ImgBurn, and for this you just want to read through it, and once you understand it, you can say yes to this. But even if it freaks you out and you say no and you still want to rip your game to a bin format, I'm going to cover that as well, don't worry about it. But just to do this right off the bat, I'm ripping this to an ISO format. So now all the games I want have been dumped, and I'm just kind of going to go through this here. This is a game which is over 4 gigabytes in size. It is 4.19 gigabytes exactly. This game, Mark of Cree, is going to give me an issue when I try to run it, so I'm going to show you how you can use modes to work through that on OPL. Silent Scope is our ISO-based CD game. And Silent Scope 2 is actually a game I ripped over using BinQ. Now, to anybody who might be wondering how they can tell if their game is CD or DVD based, if a good rule of thumb is really, if it is going to be in an ISO such as this and it's multiple gigabytes, it's going to be a DVD. If it is 700 megabytes or lower, it's going to be a CD such as my Silent Scope, or it's going to be in BinQ format as CDs normally are. Although that's not truly indicative of how it will be all the time, just look out for the file size. It's going to be 700 megabytes or lower. So first of all, let's get some of these games transferred over. So Mark of Cree I know is my DVD based game, and this is going to work just fine. So I'm going to copy out the ISO, go into your USB drive, DVD, and paste it right here. And as you can see, it is copying with no issue, as expected. So once that finishes up, which is going to be very soon, you can go into your CD-based game if you're going to be playing one. Mine's going to be Silent Scope. Grab your ISO file if your game is already in ISO format, copy it out, go to your USB drive, CD, and paste it in right here. And this should take even less time, but as you can see, that is all there is to it. So it's pretty easy for that. If you already have your CD game in ISO format, it's going to copy over with no issue. If you have a DVD, it needs to be in ISO, and again, I'm stressing these have to be .iso format. If you don't know what the extension is, on Windows you can click on View and tick File Name Extensions. So as you can see right there, I can't tell what it is, but if you go to View, File Name Extensions, it shows up as .iso. So that's 2 games right there out of the 4. Now, what about the other ones? Well, that's where we're going to need our other applications. So first of all, let's tackle Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. This is a DVD-based game, and this is a DVD ISO. Now, if we copy it out and go to our USB drive, DVD, and paste it in here, it should copy over, but look at this. We get a file size limitation because this is an issue with FAT32. It does not allow for files larger than 4 gigabytes in size, which again, unfortunately, is a lot of the good PS2 games that we want to play. So for this is where we need to use USBUtil to split out the game onto our USB drive. So we can close out of here, and let's go ahead and fire up USBUtil. For USBUtil, right click and extract it. It should extract into its own folder, which you can open up here, and open up whichever exe you want to. Mine is going to be the English version, of course. Once you go through here, you can press OK, and now we need to copy this over, get this all set up. So this does look a little bit odd to use at first, but this is easy enough once you get the hang of it. So for this, you just go to File and Create Game from ISO. You could also do it from CD or DVD if you wanted to, but I prefer to rip using ImgBurn. So go to Create Game from ISO. Now over here on the left, this is the source. You want to find exactly where your game is. And on the right, this is our destination. So you can go to Grand Theft Auto, whichever game you're using. Once you double click that here, you should get the ISO that you are trying to convert over. So that is it. I've selected it. If you have a bunch of games in one folder, you're going to get several, and you can pick all of those if you want to, but I'm just going to do one for now. So mine is San Andreas, and on the destination, you want to click on this, and you want to find where your USB drive is. So I know for a fact mine is the I drive, so you just click on whichever USB drive it is, and you want to click on the root of it. You don't want to put it anywhere else. Now for this, you can pick whichever media you're wanting to. Now I'm assuming you're only going to be using this for large DVD based games, so you can manually click on DVD, or you can keep it auto, it's up to you. But really this I would only recommend using for DVD games. So now looking at this, we have our ISO to convert. We're going to put it on our USB drive, and it's a DVD. And this is the game name, which we can keep it there. So click on Create, and at this point, as you can see, mine's going pretty fast, but it's now going to split the ISO and copy it onto our USB drive. The original one is not going to be modified, it's going to be splitting a copy of this, but once this is done, there we go, we can close out of here, and now it's showing up on the USB drive just fine. That is the game. So we can exit out of this because we no longer need it, because this is the one large USB based game that I wanted to do. Now, if you look at here on the USB drive, you're also going to notice something different. You're going to see that we have our CD game, our DVD game, but we're also going to have this mess of files right here. And these 5 files make up Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. You don't want to change the names on them, you don't want to mess with them, you don't want to move them. This is expected. I know it looks a little bit messy, but for these larger games, they have to be split like this. So we have 3 of our 4 games already copied over. Now our very last game is another CD game, and this is Silent Scope 2. Now, typically you would think that you could just copy and paste this into the CD folder. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do that if it's in bin.q format. It must be in ISO format. So if it's not in ISO format, we have to convert it. And for that, I recommend using OPL Manager. Now for our OPL Manager, you just need to right click and extract this into its own folder. When you open up OPL Manager, just go into the folder here and open up the exe. Now checking this for updates on startup is just fine, hit save. And we're going to do normal mode because we're not doing network or a local PS2 hard drive. We're just going to do normal mode since that's for a USB drive. And here we need to select our USB drive. So you can click on the browse button. Now navigate down and click on your USB drive itself and press OK and save. Now it's going to say here no CD or DVD or art folder found in the select OPL folder. Make sure that's fine and we can press OK. And we can also say yes to creating all of these folders. So it's also going to tell us there might be some bad named ISOs, which that's fine. We can actually use this opportunity to fix those up. So press OK for all the bad ones. These are our bad ISOs. These are the ones that are just fine. However, let's first take care of copying over that final game. So for this, we need to go up to Tools, Disk Converts to ISO. You'll want to do this bin nrg mdf image cdi to ISO. Click on Open File, browse for your game, so mine is Silent Scope 2, and here's the bin file, and everything here populates out, and then click on Browse. Now you'll need to go to your USB drive and navigate to the CD folder, and this is what our game ISO is. So if you want to rename this, that is up to you. If not, that's fine. I actually am going to rename this just to keep it in check here. But once you have this all set up, we're going to save this to our CD folder. Click on Save, press Start, and there we go. It already created the ISO file. So I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm also going to do File, Refresh List. And now it's showing 3 bad named ISOs, which is okay. We're going to fix those up. So the last thing here, we now have all of our games set up. We have all of them set up just fine, but we need to fix up our ISOs, and we can do some other stuff if we want to. So for our bad ISOs, just come over here and you can also read the errors. So here, using incorrect naming format, incorrect naming format, incorrect naming format. All right. So let's go ahead and modify these. Now for this, let's do try update file name. We're going to rename this. So it does want us to rename the ISOs, which is fine. Press yes, go to the other ones. We're going to want to fix these up. And that one I end up breaking myself. But either way, they should all be in the home directory now, and they should all look like this. Just fine. So now with OPL Manager, I'm not going to do a whole in-depth thing here, but there's a lot of awesome stuff you can do. So let's take San Andreas for example. On this, I'm going to click this and I can go to Edit CFG. And there's a few things you can do, like you can edit all the metadata and such. So I can click on Get Title. It got the proper title. You can set how many players are going to be there. You can really do all of this stuff here. I guess, yeah, ESRB, and you can change whatever this is going to be here. Let's make it M. Just make a few of those changes if you so want to do. And you can even change the modes right here, which I will be getting into that once we actually start playing the games. So once you have all of this edited to your liking here, you can press Save, and you can navigate over to the other games if you want to. I'm not going to be messing with any of these, but this is just an example with the configuration editor. For any of these as well, you can also go to Manage Arts, and you can click on Get Art from Available Server or bring in your own. If you so choose, that's okay. And yeah, I'm just going to select all of these here to make this look cool. So again, this is just completely optional, but it does make this look a little bit nicer. So there we go, we have all of that set up, and I'll actually even edit my other games here too real quick, which you can navigate over just by doing that and doing the exact same thing, just searching for all of these one by one and making your game library look a little bit nicer. Again, this step is completely optional, but if you'd like to do it, then why not? So at this point here, I think we have everything looking real good. All of our names are just fine, the files have been renamed with no issue, and we have everything looking very nice from the Art Manager. Now the very last thing I am going to mention in regards to this before we move over to the PS2 is I know for a fact Mark of Cree does have some issues. Now there's modes that you can use in OPL. And you can do this by going to Edit CFG, and you can select which modes you want to utilize right here, and then save. Now if you want to, you can look up all these games one by one, but maybe you have a ton of games that you're going to be adding here and you just don't have the time for that, so you kind of just want to play it by ear. That's fine as well too, and I'm going to show you how to save your modes per game on OPL itself. So with that, we can exit out of here. I don't need to save the changes. Exit out of OPL Manager, and just taking one last look at the USB drive, we're going to have all this stuff here, but this is where our split games are going to be, this is where our CD-based games will be, and this is where our DVD-based games will be. So with all that ironed out, let's right-click, eject, and let's move over to our PS2. Alright, so once you're back over at the PS2, make sure you plug in your USB drive and go down to OPL and launch it. When you launch OPL, if yours is looking like mine here, there's going to be a few settings you need to tweak, or if your games aren't loading, they're still going to need to be tweaked. So first of all, let's go to our main settings. For our USB device start mode, you can change this to either manual or auto. I'd recommend changing it to auto. And for the default menu, I'm actually going to change mine to USB games. So you can press OK, and I'd also recommend going into your display settings, go down to enable cover art, and turn that on if you enabled cover art and used it, because I just set up all this cover art, I want it to look nice. With all that set up here, we can go down to save changes, it's saved the config, and now let's press circle to go to our games list, and if all done successfully, look at this. All 4 of our games are showing up. So this is our large DVD game, this is our smaller DVD game, this is our ISO based CD, and this is our BenQ based ISO, which we had to convert over to an ISO file. So what I'm going to do is launch each of these games. So Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, let's fire this up first. Now it might take a while to fire up because remember what I said at the beginning of this video. USB is going to take longer, USB is slower, and in my opinion, USB is the worst method of loading up games here on the PS2. But if you really want to use USB, you're more than welcome to. And even here, I do know San Andreas does take a while to load up on the PS2, but this is just an example of how long this might take to load up on here. Again, it's going to take longer just because of the limitations of USB on the PS2. So here we go, we finally got in game, and as you can see, I mean, once you're in game, it's mostly fine on here. It's just going to be with some of the bigger stuff such as FMVs as well as loading up for the first time or just loading screens. But once you're actually playing, it's going to be pretty okay, I would say. So this works just great. I'm not seeing any issue right now. Let's try out one of our other games. Alright, so I just had to add another game on here, Jack 2. I didn't show this process because it was the exact same as the others, but I was thinking Mark of Cree was broken, but this game actually worked just fine. Now as you can see, I'm just here on the start screen, but Mark of Cree has booted up with no issue, so I was mistaken, but I'll also show what was going on there. But let's try an example of a game which is not going to work. Now although OPL is great, it's not going to have 100% perfect compatibility, and Jack 2 here there is a little bit of a fix for it, but you'll see. So for this, I'll go ahead and try to run the game, and it seems like it's going to work just fine, but we are going to get to a hard stopping point. This right here is exactly where we get stuck, so we just come to a black screen after the initial splash screens show up. So I know that this game works, but we do need to change some modes on here. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's go ahead and go back over to our computer for the last time. I'm going to have this link down below in the description as well, which will be the OPL Compatibility List. And here you can either select which game you want alphabetically, or you can look it up. So for example, Mark of Cree, this is how I got confused. Right here, Mark of Cree, everything is fine, this is the US version, and it says mode 6 is needed, but this is over SMB. So that means if you are playing the Mark of Cree over your network on your PS2, it will not boot if mode 6 is not enabled, but it works just fine over USB. However, Jak 2, for example, is one of those games I knew for sure would not work. So I'll go ahead and look up the Jak games, and almost all of them have some issues here. And even Jak 2, we can check this out. So we found it, this is over USB, and it requires modes 3, 6, and 7. Now it does say here that the game is playable up to 94%, then it freezes. And it's also worth noting this was on an older version of OPL, so that might have changed. But we just want this game to work. So there are two ways we can change the mode. The first of which, if you want to do it on your PC, is you load up your USB drive, go over to your game, go to Edit CFG, and from here you can tick which modes you want to enable, and then you can click on Save, and those modes will be enabled for your game. The second here is going to be directly on OPL. So for this, you need to highlight your game, press triangle for the game menu, go to Game Settings, and here are all the modes. So again, for this, we need mode 3, we need mode 6, but there's no mode 7 on here. So with that, it might actually be better to do this on OPL Manager. But either way, there are the two ways you can change your modes. Once you have all those modes changed on here at least, you can press OK, and you can press Save Changes to save this for your specific game. So with my modes set up, let's go ahead and fire up Jak 2, give it a few moments, and let's see if we can get any further than we did before. And there we go, we did not get this cutscene before, which is working just fine now. So that's about all there was to it in regards to enabling those modes. You all saw that we were not able to get this far in the actual game itself with nothing configured, but once we set up modes 3, 6, and 7, at least for this game, we were able to get a little bit further. Now, granted, a lot of games aren't going to require specific modes, and there's not going to be one end-all be-all solution for that, so I do recommend you look up these games, and it's going to be on a per game basis. If you don't have that many games that you're going to be messing with, that's completely fine. You don't have to do this with a whole ton. However, my method in which I do this is I personally just usually play my games, and if I run into an issue with a certain game, I will look up the modes there because it's pretty uncommon to have to select certain modes, at least in my experience. But as we can see, Jak 2 is now fixed and working just fine. Alright, so for our first CD game, this here is Silent Scope, which seems to have loaded up with no issue on here, thankfully. We're all good on that. So, as you can see, this is a CD game which was loading up just fine. The only caveat to your CD games is, again, they have to be in a .iso format. So if they are not in .iso format, they have to be either ripped to .iso or converted to .iso. And for our last game here, this is Silent Scope 2. If you remember, this was a BinQ game I had ripped over, which I had to convert over to ISO, and then copy to the USB drive, and this is again a CD game. So this is also working just fine with no issue. That's been all of our games that we were able to copy over and successfully run. So there we go, that's about it everyone. That is everything I know in regards to ripping, naming, setting up, formatting, splitting, fixing, getting your PS2 games working on OPL from a USB drive. That is all I know. Hopefully you all enjoyed this crash course on it, and I know there was a lot of information to take in here, but I wanted to show you all everything. I want to show you all some issues, how to fix them, and I wanted to make sure that I packed this with literally everything I knew in regards to launching games successfully from a USB drive through OPL, and I hope it truly helped you all out. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated, and if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too.